the EA F1 games made by Codemasters ever change the game engine they are built upon? That is the question that is on my mind right now. It is not a new question by any means. There's been plenty of debate about the F1 game changing its game engine for the last, I don't know, like 2 years at least, it feels. Especially in the last year, it's come up more and more. It's come up recently in discussions with other creators talking about it. But for me, it came back into my mind recently because of two things happening in the wider gaming industry. One in the genre of racing, which was Assetto Corsa EVO being revealed. And if you don't know, that game is not going to be running on the Unreal Engine, unlike its predecessor, ACC, that was on Unreal, but Assetto Corsa are moving back to their own in-house made engine, a brand new one for Assetto Corsa EVO, and we'll come to the reasonings and everything and what we can maybe deduce from that later in a bit. Because the second thing that also brought this conversation and this topic into my mind was in a completely different genre in the gaming world. Halo has announced they are moving to the Unreal Engine. They are ditching their in-house engine. They are ditching that for Unreal 5 to usher in a new era of Halo. Something similar to what a lot of F1 gamers have been kind of asking for in the recent year, or years, plural. And a lot of the optics around Halo moving from their in-house engine to Unreal, when you read the articles, when you read the reasoning, it all starts to sound very, very nice and kind of almost makes you think, oh, could we not have that for the F1 game? Could we have this new era for the F1 game? But then, of course, there is the other side of it. The other side being things like Assetto Corsa moving back to their own in-house engine, and other examples from even EA's own WRC game made by Codemasters. That's on Unreal, and there's some learnings from that of why they moved there, but also what they got by moving there, and maybe some reasonings why they wouldn't. So this video is kind of just discussing pros, cons maybe of the F1 game changing engine. And you may think that this video is just going to be a whole video of me going, oh, the F1 game needs to get off the Ego engine, they need to go to Unreal, they need to go. No, actually doing the research and looking through these articles ahead of time before starting to record this video, I'm very torn in my own head, actually, because there are so many good points and counterpoints of moving engine and not moving engine. There's actually, it's a tough thing. It's not a black and white situation. There are many reasons actually why, if you really look into the details, there's good reason for the F1 games to stick with the Ego engine. But the asterisk there is, in my opinion, there still needs to be some tweaking internally of that engine. Anyway, let's get into it. So we're starting off here with this first article from Eurogamer talking about Halo, because this was really the thing that sparked this topic in my mind, is seeing Halo announce that they are moving to Unreal, seeing the discourse online from gamers, from YouTube analysts and whatever that are in the gaming space talking about this. You know, I'm a gaming nerd. I like to follow everything with gaming, even though on this channel I just talk about F1 and racing. I'm a huge gaming nerd, so I always follow all this kind of different news. I watch different creators myself on different genres of games, because I'm interested in all of it, basically. So this was very interesting to see this move from Halo to Unreal 5. And it's a big deal because they're trying this kind of reset and ushering in this new era. Discussing the move to Unreal, Halo Studios said the change means faster and smoother development and iterations now possible, while also allowing for an easier onboarding of new team members who know the toolkit already. Obviously, this will be specific to, you know, Halo's needs when it comes to what they're using the engine, you know, to build out their game, because the faster, smoother development and iteration may not translate the same for a racing game, because it's a very different kind of thing. It's a very different genre of game compared to Halo in terms of like the generation they're trying to make of all these landscapes. And it's why WRC moved to Unreal, because they're creating these massive rally stages. But at the same time, the second bit is a good point for me. Easier onboarding of new team members who know the toolkit already. If you're going out and hiring new people to come make your game. If you're on an engine that is wildly used across the industry, they can come in, they know how the tool works, they know how to code stuff, they know what they're doing, and it's easy. But if they come in and they've worked on a different game, let's talk about EA and Cody's. If they hire from a different racing studio, they worked on a different racing game, they're bringing their expertise, their outsider, because it's on a different engine, Ego, it's only contained with Codemasters game. If they bring in new hires and stuff, they're gonna have to teach them how the Ego engine works, how this works, and there's a whole extra process and layer to that. So this, for Halo, has allowed them to maybe expand their team, and will allow them to expand their team and get new blood in for the studio to usher in a new era, which is what they've been very candidly talking about, is, you know, being a fresh slate for Halo. After what from the outside I can only gather that Halo Infinite, the last one they did, just really fell flat, wasn't, you know, living up to the expectations, and people really wanted a big change. Does that sound familiar? Yes, that's why this again has kind of, you know, really triggered in me the conversation about talking about the F1 game and its engine. And it was this tweet as well, which I'll chuck up on screen right now, but I'm reading it off my phone, from a journalist saying about Halo: as a studio brand beat, this is exceptionally well done. The Halo team is asking players to believe that the next game will be meaningfully different and better. They offer solid reasons: modern engine, less tech debt, different growing team, and a new look. But the zinger is the closing line from the studio head: Halo Infinite was the last remnant of how we made Halo games in the past. That was our recipe, and what we're doing right now is changing our recipe. That's humility. And I really feel like, after how F1 24 has been received, how really, when you look at the trend that we've already talked about of the F1 games since EA basically bought Codemasters and had proper input from F1 22 onwards, that decline there, I feel like, depending on how F1 25 goes, into a completely new era for Formula 1 in 2026 in real life, that is a big, great landmark point where they could do something similar, of trying to refresh and really try and make a statement to players to get that trust back that they've lost over the last couple of years, in a similar vein. You know, obviously the modern engine part is the thing we're going to debate a little bit in this video, but the rest of it, different growing team, a new look, you know, promising and kind of trying to tell that the next installation is going to be meaningfully different and better, and having the humility to go, look, the last couple of games, or the last game in Halo's case, has been poor. It didn't live up. You know, it was what we used to do. This is now, we're changing things up. And I think the sense is from the player base that is what they want to hear. They want to hear that things are being done a bit differently, or we're shaking things up. The last time things got really shook up like that for the F1 game, yes, we had a very bare bones F1 2015 game. But then look what happened. It spawned and blossomed a line of games that were getting better and better and better. Yes, there were games in the middle, like 2017, 2018 were very mid. But in general, the F1 games were consistently getting better. The tech was looking better. The game overall just felt and looked better overall. But now we are in a decline. So I bring that up just to kind of explain why actually the Halo news made me think about the F1 game. It's more of that specific tweet from that journalist. So going back to the engine talk, this is an old article about why EA WRC is going to use Unreal 5, not EA's Frostbite, which is EA's other engine that pretty much powers most of their games now, like FIFA, the college football, like all the sports games now use Frostbite. Frostbite originally was a Battlefield engine, but it's now just powering most of their sports games. But no, EA WRC uses Unreal 5. This is from like October 2023, so it's an old article, about a year old now. But the quotes about why the WRC felt the need to switch are quite interesting to look back at. Ego was a fantastic engine for us. We made a lot of incredible good games, but it reached a point where we wanted stages to be longer and longer, and our environments to be bigger and visually richer. That was the point I was coming across, and it's a point that will come up later about the reason why they definitely wanted to switch to Unreal for EA Sports WRC was because the rally stages are big landscape maps in comparison to the scaling of the F1 circuit is actually quite small in scale compared to the rally stages. So actually, in terms of the virtual game space, the WRC game is a bigger game in terms of the game map. I'm talking about. Obviously, in terms of player numbers, the brand, whatever, obviously the F1 game is bigger. I'm talking about the actual in-game map is bigger because of these big rally stages. So that's why they wanted to move to Unreal. But I think this same point could be pointed towards F1 to have more visually richer F1 environments, you know, actually, you know, flesh out the outside bits of the circuit, flesh out the paddock to a point where you could walk through the paddock as a virtual character, like in first person, and go through pit buildings and stuff like that. Like, they do talk about the biggest hurdle to overcome was to get the handling to be Codemasters handling, and that wasn't something Unreal had out of the box, but it turned out we could work with them to bring our own handling across. So they basically transplanted Codemasters handling essentially into the Unreal Engine to make their game work. So all of their handling physics essentially plug into the engine. So it would be viable to plug the F1 handling physics into Unreal Engine. And the last point here in this article is obviously EA WRC only released on the current gen hardware, and that is a point that I and lots of people have been banging on about. And to be honest, it's a big thing in the whole gaming industry right now of, you know, developers kind of being, you know, unfortunately tethered back to the old gen consoles. There's a lot of different factors with that debate and issue, you know, cost of living, supply of hardware, people affording it, you know, all this stuff. But at the end of the day, there is no doubt that keeping games on the old generation does hold it back, because you're capped at what you can do because you need to make it run on that old gen. And WRC, they say the choice to leave Xbox One and PS4 behind wasn't driven by the engine swap, but the trend for more expansive games with greater visual fidelity in general. To give the team the biggest quality remit possible, we focused on current gen only. These are all quotes and discourse that I want to be hearing from the F1 team. I want to be hearing this, that we're going to finally ditch the old gen because we want to maximize the visual fidelity and the how real things look with the current F1 games. Because yes, there are bigger glaring issues like the handling, the actual game mechanics. All of that I've covered in other videos. We've talked about that already. But as I've also mentioned, looks matter. First impressions matter. And if they want to reignite the F1 game franchise and kickstart again, they need to come with a game where in the first trailer, your jaw's on the floor. Like, oh my God, that looks so different. That looks cutting edge and new gen. And frankly, that has not been the case for about four years now. It's kind of looked like the same exact game, just with the new cars and the new drivers and whatever for the last 4 years. It's not really looked that much different. They can bang on about different lighting and such, but it's very nitpicky. Like, you have to really be looking for it. Whereas remember, when they went from F1 2018 to 19, and in-house they made a big change with the Ego engine, they made a big upgrade to the Ego engine. Everyone, I remember, you know, we all watched the F1 2019 reveal trailer where we saw that first on board. It was Ricardo at Bahrain. I remember it. And everyone was like, oh my God, this looks so different to F1 2018. So it was a massive step up. And that was in-engine. So there's no doubt that maybe they know they've got the feedback before about how big looks can make a difference to the hype of their game. They know it from F1 2019. They do. So it's somewhat puzzling that they're just okay with the last 4 or 5 games just looking the same very much. That's not to say that WRC on Unreal has been smooth sailing. Because moving to a review video here from Traction's YouTube channel on the WRC game, they go into problems with the game, and I read into this as well. Stuttering, frame rate problems. So even though Unreal is great for visual fidelity, with a racing game, because things are so demanding, things are, you know, moving so quickly, and frame rate is so important in a racing game, it had issues. It had popping issues with, you know, replay cameras, and, you know, they had to turn down graphic settings to like low on PC to make it run. So it definitely didn't come with its issues, you know, teething issues at launch. I think since then they have, you know, done patches to try and improve that. Maybe any people that play WRC in the comments below can let me know at what point is the game at now. Like, do you feel like it's running nicely on Unreal now with the patches they've done, or is still, you know, buggy in places? So in the end, the discourse around EA and Cody's actually using Unreal for WRC, a game they've got in-house, so they can, you know, look at, you know, data and, you know, across teams they could talk to each other. There clearly is a bit of pros and cons here, you know, the pros of, you know, opening it up and stuff, but also also there's clearly some cons that they found and teething issues. So that's, that's one side of thing in-house with EA and Cody's. Then you look outside to the announcement of Assetto Corsa EVO. Now, this is going to run on their in-house engine. Assetto Corsa Competizione, ACC, I can't even know, I don't even know how to pronounce it. ACC, that run on Unreal Engine 4. But they're going back to their own in-house engine, and this is why we're developing new tech for Assetto Corsa. Well, they said 2 at the time, but it's EVO now. We will not use Unreal because we need greater flexibility. So this is a great game maker at Kunos team saying that they needed more flexibility, that the Unreal Engine was not giving them the flexibility they needed. Unreal Engine is a terrific technology, and I think games like Ride 4, MotoGP, or Assetto Corsa Competizione have proven to be great games, but the way we're used to work, we like to think ourselves as a technology provider, not just a game developer. We like to work even more on our tech because it allows us to create specific tools and features we need for racing simulation. So for them, they just wanted more tools, so that's more on the developer side, but also I'm just kind of getting the sense also they feel like it will just be better for the game as a platform to have completely what they need to make a better simulation game. Now, obviously, the F1 game is kind of half and half, but, that's an argument of not moving to Unreal, because although it works well, like he mentioned, for MotoGP is running on the Unreal Engine. I play the MotoGP games at least once a year. They're beautiful. They look really great. And obviously, it's a bit different, talking about the physics and the handling and such of MotoGP, because it's on a controller. It's not like a one-to-one with the F1 game with a wheel. Like, you can't do that unless you get a simulator or anything like that. So it's a bit difficult to talk about the physics and, like, limitations with Unreal. But for what MotoGP is, I think it looks great. I think it's a greatly fleshed out game. Like, if you go back to any of the MotoGP videos I've done, the career modes are fleshed out. Everything's beautifully crafted. Like the menus, the actual, vistas of the circuits, the tracks, the bikes, the different riders, the liveries and such. It all looks great. It's a really lovely made game, but obviously it's a very different game, and I can't speak to how the handling, the limitations of a car racing game would act in Unreal compared to MotoGP. Well, I guess you can a little bit, because Kunos has opted not to go back to Unreal for their next Assetto Corsa game. So that maybe tells you they don't want to stay on Unreal and they want to be more flexible. So that is, I think, a big marker for, okay, you know what? Hold the Unreal talk. Maybe going to Unreal is not the best thing for the games. Kunos are a great team. Assetto Corsa is as popular as it ever has been. It's like 10 years old now, and it's so popular. So they know what they're doing. They know how to make a great platform of a game, a great technology behind a racing game, and they are opting to go in-house again after testing out Unreal with their intermediary Competizione game. And now that gets me to the final bit. So this is an article on Overtake GG. Why Codemasters hasn't changed the game engine for F1 24. This is a little interview with Lee Mather, and this is nothing I've not heard from Lee himself as well. So the last version that they're running on is Ego Engine 4.0. That was the engine first introduced into F1 2015, but Lee actually states that it changes significantly every year, and we have an ongoing internal joke that maybe we should increment the version number because it's so drastically different. I think I even heard the same sort of sentiment said to me in person when I've gone behind the scenes at Codemasters before. But the thing is, the incremental changes, I think lately haven't been big enough, in my opinion. I think the incremental change they made from F1 2018 to 19, that's the last biggest step up we've seen in the Ego Engine 4.0. There's been smaller changes, yes, it did look better from 2019 to 2020, 2020 to 2021, and then maybe a tiny bit better in 22, but I feel like stabilized. 23 in parts looked better when they did the cutscenes and stuff and the trailers and whatnot, and obviously they had that weird chromic abrasion effect going on, but it was very similar to 22, and 24 is pretty much the same as 23, just without the chromic abrasion. Lee mentions the new global illumination for the lighting. It doesn't really show. Maybe I'm being silly for saying that, but I just don't see it. I don't see much of a difference there. We have up to 120 FPS on consoles, and obviously they're even getting a PS5 Pro update where you can play 4K 120 FPS, I believe, on the PS5 Pro. But to me, still, I've seen a comparison video. I've seen a comparison video where they did it and they showed it on PS5 Pro. And yeah, you can see a little bit more of the crispness, but it doesn't actually look any kind of different. It doesn't look groundbreakingly different. And so if they insist on making incremental changes because they feel like, you know, from the discourse we've seen about, okay, like WRC, maybe they won't actually find enough improvements. They'll actually have some detriments to the way it launches or the graphics fidelity or the frame rate performance. You know, Assetto Corsa, it's less flexibility. Sure, okay, stay on the Ego engine, but I think these incremental changes need to be bigger. I for one, would love to see them, okay, stay on the Ego engine, stay on it then, but make a bigger change like we saw in 2014 to 2015. And yes, I know that was so big that it gave us a bare bones game, but like I literally said at the start of the video, I think now at this point, F1 gamers would accept a year where you need to grow. Maybe even a year where, you know, taking some inspiration from WRC now, they just did a 2024 update to their current game. So there's not a new WRC game for 2024. They just brought out a 2024 update. I think at this point, F1 gamers would accept a big DLC update to last year's game to give yourself a whole year to spruce up the next Ego Engine 5.0, to make that step change like you did in 2014 to 15. Get rid of the last gen consoles, make that step change with the new Ego engine. I feel like at this point, with how frustrated people have been getting over the last couple of years with the F1 games, we're at that point where now I think it's a bit of stoicism about the F1 community. We would accept waiting and sitting a bit to get that change. I could be wrong though. Let me know in the comments below. I feel like at this point I'm willing to wait and have that stoicism about it, but let me know. I could be completely wrong there. He goes on to talk about the team knowing every nut and bolt of it, so it's something they've created themselves. It's bespoke for the game, so we have total flexibility to do what we want, and I don't think we'll be able to make huge changes of physics so easily if it wasn't our tech. So he's talking about physics changes won't be easier on Unreal. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. The physics stuff, you want your own engine. Let's ignore the fact that in F1 24 that really went down the toilet a little bit, but hopefully it'll be back on the right path in next year's game and in the future. But visually and the way it looks and just everything else apart from the physics, which I know are very, very important in the racing game, but everything else I feel, if you know the nuts and bolts, why not get into the muck and tidy up the engine, you know, spruce it up. You know, the game files, there's so much, like, I feel like game bloat from every game. Like the F1 game, that some bugs, I think Alex Gillen and Tom have mentioned this before in their videos, that some bugs return on new F1 games because we're still on the same, you know, archetype, you know, the same structure. So a bug that got fixed in the last game will come back on the new game because it's a brand new save, like a brand new start, but on the same architecture. So the bug carries over. So I feel like there needs to be a bit of cleaning of house, like clean up the bloating, clean up the bloatware in the game architecture to really, you know, get rid of these things at launch, iron things out a bit more, and have a bit of a step change. And to that effect, also, I've thought this before, I think others have as well. So when F1 24 had this trailer, this is game engine footage, but not all images appear in the game. But when have you ever seen the F1 game, F1 24, look this good? It does not look this good in the game. It just doesn't. Maybe in the cutscene loading up a race, loading up quali. But it doesn't look like this when you're playing, when you're racing. None of these, like, this well may be the lovely reflection tech you're talking about. But it doesn't really show up this well when you're actually playing the game. Like, all of this stuff is in engine, but not as you play. That's why they say it's game engine footage. It's not game footage, it's game engine footage. Well, I think the step change, if they want to stay on Ego, I'm at this point now, looking at the discourse, like I said, with the Assetto Corsa, WRC, etc., I'm willing to be like, okay, maybe they know what they're talking about staying on Ego. I think we should be aiming for this tagline to say in-game footage. Like, this should be in-game how these cars look. In-game how it looks whilst I'm racing around. Not just what the engine is capable of. And that is where you get back to the bit where I'm talking about maybe finally ditching the old gen and you know, trying to whatever they did in 2019 to make that step change from 2018 to 19, and whatever they did to make the Ego 4.0 from 14 to 15, whatever they did, like, I obviously don't understand the technological bits of how you would do the step change, but whatever you did, I feel like you need to be working on that to make a step change where this kind of footage is in-game footage, not just game engine footage. Like, I have never seen F1 24 look this good. Never. This is game engine footage, but it's not game footage, and I think that needs to change. I think that's what they need to aim for if they honestly want a first look like, oh my god, it actually looks different. So there we have it. I think we've had a fair discussion about the game engine. I think I would hope if someone from Cody's was to watch this, they would agree that I've given a fair assessment of, from their side, of why they would stay on the engine, because looking outward at things like Assetto Corsa WRC, you can see clearly, you can't ignore them. There are definitely some things that show you why maybe it'd be better off staying on Ego. But if they're going to do that, I feel like there needs to be some internal tinkering, some internal improvement on that, which is more than just incremental. It needs to be a step change rather than incremental. But then at the same time, there's no doubt in my mind that if one year they just turned up with a new engine, like Unreal or whatever, that would at least create hype. Whether it be a better game, that's very, very up for debate. But the hype would certainly be up there, just because it would look, obviously, so different. And it would just be that expectation. Expectations are very powerful in the human mind. So expectations, that would set the tone for the marketing or whatever like that. But that's you know, that's my thoughts on it. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Hopefully, if you like the F1 games as much as I did, you found the chat interesting, and you can see the facts and the points from both sides, basically, of this argument. And to that effect, let me know in the comments below, where do you stand? What do you make of these kind of different points that I was making from WRC, Assetto Corsa, MotoGP, Halo, etc. Let me know in the comments below. If you're around here, then do get subscribed for weekly Formula 1 content. And that has been your, well, at this point, your weekly dose of me talking about the game I love, and I just want it to get better and better in the future. Till the next one, guys, hope you enjoy your day. Goodbye.